we find out how the first-generation Nissan Qashqai proved itself in the fight for a buyer. What modifications of the crossover are most resistant to wear, how to extend the life of the car, and how much will it cost to repair the main components and assemblies of Qashqai with the solid mileage. The left lamp board, on which the lamps are located, is installed very close to the body panel. As a result, over time, it overheats and burns out. Most often because of this, the brake light fails. Fortunately, the board is available as a separate spare part. The paintwork is quite thin and does not resist chipping and surface scratch as well. But the body does not suffer from congenital foci of corrosion. Moreover, in Qashqai, unlike many models, the trunk lid under the lining does not rust. Original windshields are short-lived. The risk of cracking even from a small pebble is much higher than many competitors. The front wiper trapezoid does not last long. Critical wear of its rods occurs after 2 years of operation. To significantly delay this moment, do not turn on the wipers if there is a pile of snow on the glass. Repair parts are not officially offered, but some services have learned how to restore traction. Therefore, do not rush to change the trapezoid assembly. There are cases of fogging headlights. This applies to both restyled and pre-reformed cars. Even without external mechanical impact, the tightness of the headlight housings is broken over time. Suspension. The front suspension of Qashqai is frankly rather weak. Silent blocks of the front levers last only 30,000 kilometers, ball bearings, a little longer. It's good that they can be changed separately. Only 40,000 kilometers keep the rear silent blocks of the front subframe. Fortunately, they are available as separate spare parts even in the original version. Front shock absorbers run an average of 80,000 kilometers, but their support bearings will have to be changed more often. Qashqai is equipped with electric power steering. The control elements of the system are located in the steering column and do not cause any complaints, but the rack and pinion mechanism begins to knock after about 60,000 kilometers of run. The new rail is expensive. Fortunately, the old one can be restored, and not spending much. Tie rods and tips also do not have a large resource, but the market offers original spare parts separately in solid substitutes. Of all the elements of the all-wheel drive transmission system, the transfer case is subject to the greatest wear. It is constantly under load, since its gears always rotate when the machine is moving, regardless of the transmission mode. It contains only 400 grams of oil. It is advisable to change the fluid every 30,000 kilometers and monitor the seals of the unit. They flow quite rarely, but if this happens, the transfer case will die very quickly. The most unfavorable mode for it is when the car starts abruptly with the wheels turned out in automatic transmission mode. The clutch abruptly connects the rear axle, and this creates an increased load on the transfer case. The rest of the nodes are quite reliable, with reasonable operation, of course. When driving off-road, you can maximize the safety of the transmission elements by the following method. We turn off the stabilization system and forcibly block the center clutch. If there is a CVT on the car, then we forcibly turn on the first virtual gear. In this embodiment, it is more difficult to load something unnecessarily and overheat. The propeller shaft crosses break only after 100,000 kilometers. They die the fastest on cars that are idle for a long time on the street. The connections turn sour. This accelerates their wear. The rear brake calipers are badly placed and not the most thoughtful design. Even during normal operation, a lot of dirt gets into the calipers. As a result, they become very sour. Therefore, with each replacement of the pads, it is imperative to carry out a full preventive maintenance with disassembly of the brake mechanisms. The weak link in the rear suspension is the silent blocks in the brake-up arms. On machines older than 5 years, rubber metal elements begin to break down, and inside them, the camber adjustment bolts turn sour. The rear shock absorbers live a little less than the front ones, regularly nursing at least 60,000 kilometers. So long. Over time, the steering column cable is frayed. At risk are cars older than 4 to 5 years. Most often, because of this, the controls located on the steering wheel for the multimedia system and cruise control fail. The driver's airbag and the car's external lighting switches also hang on this cable. Pre-styling cars are characterized by unstable manufacturing quality of interior elements. For example, on relatively short runs, the steering wheel peels off, as well as the paint on the plastic. The seat trim is wiped. When updating Qashqai, the manufacturer noticeably improved the quality, and most of the shortcomings were gone. From age, the wiring connectors located at the driver's feet under the front pillar trim often oxidize and rot. In this place, condensate from evaporation actively accumulates, especially in winter. The trouble is that almost all the electrics of the rear left side of the body are tied to these connectors, including the power supply of the fuel pump and the rear lighting. Anything can refuse, there are no characteristic patterns. The wiring has been successfully repaired. Often the stove fan fails. Over time, it becomes clogged with dirt. The motor starts to work at its limit and eventually burns out. This usually happens after 4 to 5 years of operation. Sometimes the air conditioning compressor clutch breaks. This happens in cars of the same age. The coupling is available as a separate spare part, but can be repaired inexpensively. Engines. The time-tested atmospheric gasoline engine 1.6 of the HR16DE series is familiar from many models of the Renault-Nissan concern, note, Tida, Fluence. The unit has proven itself well and does not cause any particular complaints. Qashqai with this motor boldly moved the threshold of 200,000 kilometers. True, the oil scraper piston rings of the HR16DE engine are prone to sticking after a run of 100,000 kilometers. The reason for this is a long ride at low revs, especially for modifications with the CVT, and an extended oil change interval. Ideally, it should be had for urban use. This driving mode is one of the most difficult, and any oils at the end of the 15,000 kilometers recommended by the manufacturers lose their working properties. The timing chain usually lives quietly until the engine is overhauled. On engines 1.6 and 2.0, the rear support dies pretty quickly. Its average resource is only 30,000 to 40,000 kilometers. At the same time, vibrations on the body increase, especially for modifications with the variator, when the driver puts the selector in drive, keeping the car on the brakes. Both engines will require replacement of the hinged belt after 3 to 4 years of operation. His videos live a little longer. By the way, servicemen have long mastered the separate replacement of their bearings, which is less expensive. Engine radiators are subject to corrosion. For this reason, often after 5 to 7 years of operation, the heat exchanger begins to leak. The 2.0 gasoline engine of the MR20DE series also lives under the hood of many models of the Franco-Japanese concern, but is less reliable than the 1.6-liter unit. The cylinder head has very thin walls. As a result, with the banal constriction of spark plugs, their wells can crack, and this leads to antifreeze getting into the oil. Factory defects are also periodically encountered, micro cracks that occur during the manufacture of heads, which make themselves felt during operation. The cylinder block is also distinguished by thin walls. There are cases when servicemen, when installing the gearbox, over-tighten the mounting bolts, which causes deformation of the fourth cylinder. For the same reason, the motor does not tolerate overheating. Because of the mating surfaces of the block and head very often warp. In addition, sometimes, when overheated, cracks appear on the crankshaft journals. Many owners put gas balloon equipment on this motor. It is better to stay away from such machines. When designing the engine, the possibility of running on gas was not taken into account. Therefore, even a properly installed LPG significantly reduces the life of the motor. On the MR20D engine, piston rings are also prone to sticking, and the timing chain sometimes stretches earlier than the overhaul period approaches, already after 80,000 kilometers. Periodically, servicemen are faced with a leak in the engine oil pan. Most often this happens on machines older than 5 years. The pallet is fixed on the sealant. Paired with a 1.6 engine is a Jatco JF015E CVT. Its design feature is the presence of a 2-stage planetary gear. At speeds up to 100 km/h, the first stage is involved, above the second. Such a scheme made it possible to significantly reduce the size of the cones and, accordingly, the overall dimensions of the variator. Alas, this intricate design does not shine with the high resource. On average, such a variator rarely takes care of more than 100,000 kilometers, and problems can begin as early as 20,000 kilometers. The first disease of JF015E is the rapid wear of the cone bearings and their seats in the unit housing. Metal chips are carried through the lubrication system and clog the solenoids in the hydraulic unit and the pressure-reducing valve in the oil pump. In addition, due to the shavings, the valve bores also wear out. Fluid pressure drops and the variator dies quickly. The second sore JF015E is the equally fleeting wear of the internal elements in the cones that ensure their movement. due to which an additional portion of chips enters the lubrication system. The belt formally has a long resource, but it is significantly reduced by the drop in oil pressure, due to which the belt begins to slip. For the restoration of this variator, you will have to pay too much, from 150,000 rubles. Servicemen recommend buying a new unit, which independent and adequate spare parts suppliers estimate at 200,000 rubles. The probability of finding a live copy on the market of contract units is extremely small, no more than 10%. The 2.0 motor relies on the JF011E series variator. It is better known on the market. It has been used and continues to be used on many models of the Renault-Nissan concern, Koleos, Tina, X-Trail, as well as on Mitsubishi Lancer and Outlander cars. Paired with this engine, the variator takes care of 150,000 to 200,000 kilometers. The JF011E variator has no characteristic source. By the end of his life, the wear of the bearings of the cones and valves in the valve body in the oil pump becomes critical. But this is quite natural. The formation of wear products, even with frequent oil changes and careful operation, is inevitable. Unlike the little brother, in most cases it makes sense to repair this variator. A complete restoration of the unit will cost 140,000 to 180,000 rubles. It also implies the replacement of the entire cooling system, since it cannot be completely cleaned of chip deposits. Buying and installing a new variator will cost much more. The first symptoms of the imminent death of any variator are not so difficult to catch. When the transmission is running, there should be no jerks or delays, especially when starting the car. The increased noise of the variator and the loss of acceleration dynamics are also alarming cause. Reduced oil change intervals and gentle operation help prolong its life. It is worth refusing to install additional crankcase protection. In particular, in Qashqai, because of it, the cooling of the variator is significantly worse. Once a year, it is important to inspect the condition of the external radiator of the unit for contamination. It is located in front of the main pair of engine and air conditioning heat exchangers. It is very important, especially in winter, to preheat the oil in the variator before driving. It reaches operating temperature much longer than engine. After warming up the engine, it is necessary, holding the foot on the brake pedal, to stand alternately on the drive and reverse for about a minute. Further, on the first kilometers of movement, avoid too active acceleration. And even in a warm state, all CVTs do not tolerate sharp starts and long slips. Ideally, in urban operation, which refers to severe conditions, the oil in the variator should be changed every 30,000 kilometers. Previously, this was recommended by the automakers themselves, but now most of them, not only Nissan, claim that the fluid is designed for the entire life of the units. When changing the oil, it is advisable to reset the aging counter. Alas, it is not possible to obtain intelligible and reliable information about its effect on the operation of variators, but at least this operation is spelled out in the factory recommendations. Some experts argue that the meter readings are needed only to assess the condition of the oil, others that, based on this data, the unit control unit corrects the fluid pressure. Given the whimsicality and low margin of safety of the variators, it is worth playing it safe and taking the second point of view on faith. Mechanical transmissions do not cause serious complaints. A 5-speed is paired with a 1.6 engine, and a 6-speed is available for a 2.0 engine. Various non-systematic breakdowns occur only due to inadequate operation. Initially, the factory maintenance schedule provided for a mandatory oil change in boxes every 90,000 kilometers. However, this operation was later cancelled. Servicemen recommend adhering to the initially recommended interval in order to maintain the reliability of the boxes, and when operating in heavy conditions, it makes sense to have the interval. Qashqai is highly liquid on the secondary market. In its class, it is distinguished by the most adequate ratio of consumer qualities and price. In my opinion, he has no serious competitors. Indeed, in those years, none of the manufacturers made such machines in this niche that would combine such qualities and a large set of options. As usual, high liquidity turns into an abundance of fraudulent ads. Therefore, you should build on dealer prices in order to somehow protect yourself. Versions with the 2.0 engine and a CVT are best sold. All-wheel drive modifications are more popular, but they are noticeably more expensive. That is, for the same money you can take a two-wheel drive car in a similar configuration, but it will be a couple of years younger. Versions with a manual transmission are more in demand in the regions, and with the CVT, in large cities. The least popular modification with a 1.6 engine and a CVT, cars even in the basic configuration, which are habitually in the least demand, but armed with mechanics, find their buyer much faster. Actually, such a modification is not very common on the market. In 80% of cases, Qashqai with a 1.6 engine is paired with a manual. The 7-seater version Qashqai Plus 2 is in good demand, but it is in a restyled version. I recommend buying a restyled Qashqai with a 2.0 engine and a CVT. The combination of these units provides decent dynamics and high driving comfort, while demonstrating good reliability. Especially if this is an updated model, the quality of the interior trim has become noticeably higher. In addition, such a version always has rich equipment and, upon subsequent sale, will leave quickly and for good money.